Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Levler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. So my guest this morning is Assemblyman Peter Abbate. He's the chair of Government Employees Committee. And welcome to the show this morning.
Oh, Dan, thank you very much, and good morning to everyone there. And first, I just want to really congratulate you on a great victory for you and your team. And the judge goes to show hard work does pay off.
Yeah, it was an interesting year. With COVID and everything else. It wasn't your normal election cycle. Let's call it that.
I understand. I went through a little bit last year in our races there. But as I said, the most important thing is that people understand what you did for them and the work that you and the whole team did over the last year. Yeah. Especially protecting those. Yeah, no, and I appreciate you saying that. So Assemblyman, you've always been a true friend to, AME, but labor in general. And the Labor Committee and the Government Employees Committee, they're two of the most important committees for public sector union workers. So we just want to talk a little bit about your role as the chair of the Government Employees Committee and, what your priorities are. Sure. Well, as I think I've stated at some of the meetings I've come out to, some of your board meetings out there, when I first got elected, that was one of my main interests, labor and government employees. My dad and mom were both people, working in the labor movement. My dad was a letter carrier, and as I get a few laughs, my mother was a clerk at a department store called E.J. Corvettes. Wow. And some of the older members remember that store. So I was brought up sort of in a labor environment and knew how important, labor was and organized labor was for its workers. And as I got into the assembly, I realized that government workers, public employees, are those who run the state. Yeah. And I use it all the time. I say, it's the services that are provided by our government and county workers who make the neighborhood what it is. And I like to stress that when people go out to buy a home, they never ask, by the way, they never ask the real estate broker, by the way, who's the assemblyman or who's the senator? What they want to know are the services they're going to provide in their neighborhood. Right. And that's the key. What's provided by your members to Suffolk County, why the population has grown so much, was people know it's a safe environment. Services are provided in a timely manner, and that's because of the workforce. Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we have a very professional workforce that I always say is very altruistic. One of the main reasons that they're working in government, and I'm sure the same it holds true for state employees, is they want to serve their community. They know they could make more money elsewhere, but there's some security in doing what they do for the government. There's that public contract. And then, on top of that, just being someone that can help the community that they're in, give back to the world, so to speak. And I think you make a good point when you say that they can go into the private sector or other sectors and make more money, but they do want to give back to the community. And that's one of my roles as chair of the Government Employees Committee, is to make sure that the benefits that we've gained over the years remain intact, and still fighting to make sure that they get benefits. They're at a lower pay than other people, but their pension, health care, and all are important parts of their daily lives, and that's why we have to maintain them. Yeah, and speaking of benefits that are in place, there are benefits that have been in place that are under attack. There are new benefits to consider, and then there are things that have kind of maybe just fallen through the cracks over the years. And, this week is important because it's National Public Safety Telecommunication Workers Week. And that's your 911 operators, your fire, rescue, and emergency service operators. The very first line of first responders, right?
And this is something you and I have talked about before. And I know that you have a bill, for those that are interested in looking it up, it's A5966, that recognizes these folks, which, again, I think the public thinks they are first responders, but they're not recognized as such. And this bill, I guess, let me have you explain rather than me try and explain your work.
Sure. No, it's a bill, and I have to let the people in Suffolk County know, and especially those members of AIM know, that the bill really originated with my colleague, Joe DiStefano, who was an employee in the county and member of AIM, that we talked about it. And the good news is, for people out there should know, he's now the ranking member on the Government Employees Committee. So we worked together, but it was his idea to make sure that first responders, I guess it's public safety dispatchers, emergency responders, emergency operators, really accredited as first responders. Under New York state law, they were not considered and still aren't considered first responders. And they're losing out on not only benefits, but security in a sense. I mean, first responders were the first to get vaccines or tests,
right?
And they weren't included in that. So this bill would make sure that they get afforded all the rights as first responders. And they are. When a person calls up for any emergency, they are the first in line to get that phone call. So they are really a first responder. They're the one who's going to dispatch whatever services are needed, police, medical services. But more than that, they're on the phone with that person, sometimes even before anybody is dispatched, giving them information on how to take care of themselves. We hear now and then of stories where a 6-year-old or 7-year-old calls up, and it's the dispatcher with that young person that's saving that person's life.
Yes.
So that's the stories that come out, but that happens daily, with adults and all. But
sure.
The stories that make it to the young kids, but it's a daily occurrence.
Yeah, and it's very different than, other folks who get phone calls. There are a lot of people that can relate to getting a lot of phone calls, a lot of jobs. But all of these phone calls that they're getting, they're really just trying to help someone in the public through some of the worst moments of their life. And it's, time and time and time again. When you hang up one phone call, the next one that's coming in is going to be someone else dealing with a very high stress, maybe worst day of their life scenario. I think generally speaking, the members of the public think that 911 call operators and dispatchers are first responders. If you were to go on the street with a microphone and say, are these people, everybody would say yes. But the way the law works, it provides certain protections and considerations for those that have that legal designation. And this is one of those things that fell through the cracks. So
that's exactly what this bill would do. It would give them that status. And it's going through the Health Committee right now, and we hope to have this bill passed by the end of session this year. But again, to my colleagues out in Long Island, Joe DiStefano, Fred Deal, and Steve Engelbright, who are on the bill, are out there trying to work and make sure that everyone is taken care of out there, especially the first responders. And I know out there they're very active in participation with the union and all men and, working men and women out there. So we'll get this done, and just one small thing that we can do to help them.
No, and I definitely appreciate it. Something I know about you that we've discussed, you've been in government for quite some time. You're someone who's known as having passed a lot of bills, and that is, that's saying something in and of itself, because Albany is... It's difficult, right? It's even common sense things sometimes are hard to get done, and so I just want to commend you on what I know your record to be.
Thank you. The common sense things are the hardest to get done.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they haven't been done yet.
Right.
Some of them, so that's the hardest thing. No, but that's what makes the job worthwhile. When I can sit back and look at a bill that takes care of literally, even if it's one individual. But basically, it really takes care of hundreds, if not thousands, of individuals when we pass a bill. And it's our state workforce, as I said. It's people who live in their communities, make their communities great, and then retire and stay in the community.
Right.
A majority, you hear these things, people going to Florida, going to Arizona. A majority of people stay in their community. They retire, they get their pension checks, and that money is spent in the community here.
Sure. And, pension checks that they've earned throughout their career by taking less in pay, right? That's definitely part of this whole process.
That's exactly right. I said a little earlier.
Yeah.
That's why we try to give, when people hear that they're getting health benefits and all. And that's why I tell people, who don't work in the fields with organized labor, that they should. Whether you work in a bank or something, they should try to organize, because even with a little less money, your security down the line is safe.
Yes.
And that's something myself and our controller, Tom DiNapoli, make sure that our pension system is one of the best, if not the best, in the entire country. It's fully funded, or 97% funded, which is considered fully funded. And whether we go through bad times or good times, that pension fund remains safe.
Yeah, and that's very important. That's something, again, Comptroller DiNapoli definitely knows. Any risk to that stuff, and I'm definitely calling.
Right. And you do call.
Yes, I do.
Just want to you. When we talk about this legislation, again, to you and your team who come up to Albany, not only to visit and meet with me on legislation, but to really talk to your whole Suffolk County delegation. And I know you've been up here besides just the Suffolk County delegation. You've spoken to chairs of numerous committees.
Sure. Yeah, it's all part and parcel with this job, because, changes on the state level affect all the counties, and Suffolk County being one of them. So, I find a lot of need to have a presence in Albany where, some have that philosophy of, well, you're in Suffolk County, just worry about what happens in Suffolk County. But when it happens on the state level, it happens to all counties in the state. So that involvement, I feel, is very important.
And just an example of this bill that Joe gave to me to see if we can get it passed. If this bill passes, there could be a credit to Suffolk County and your organization and Assemblyman Joe DeStefano, that it would be statewide.
Right.
So that means first responders, the operators, emergency dispatchers will be statewide, and all because of the organization that you guys provided.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And, so there's a number of other bills going on, and obviously this budget year was probably one of the more interesting ones. But before we talk about the budget process in general, there were a couple of key things that you worked on that, we think is really great. And number one on that list, the Public Employee Death Benefit, which is Assembly Bill 3988.
Yeah, well, as you said earlier, it's been a different couple of a year and a half now, almost a year and a half now with COVID. Everything has changed, and sad to say, but we had to do legislation. As you said, the death benefit bill, which we put right out there. I think it was one of the first bills dealing with COVID, that God forbid someone passes away, that the beneficiary can be safe, and the family should know that they will be receiving that death benefit and not just the 3-year salary, which is the normal benefit.
Right.
Going on. We originally had the bill in for 3 years after negotiating with the Senate and the governor. It was reduced to 1 year. It expired on December 31st of last year, but we just passed in the beginning of February. We passed a bill to extend it for an additional 2 years. And hopefully we won't have to use it that often, but it is extended so people can rest assured that they won't have to worry, God forbid, something like that happens.
Sure.
We also went in, and I'm sure your members know and people know that to take a vaccine, and for those who have to take 2 vaccines, that the employer must now give 4 hours off so that person can take the vaccine. So a total of 8 hours if you're Moderna or Pfizer, that the employee has to give you time off to take that shot to do it, which I think is very, very important. We had another bill out there now also that if you call in sick or you're not feeling well, which all the public announcements say you should stay home if you're feeling ill, because some employees in the state have not taken retaliatory actions against members, we have a bill that says they cannot do that. They cannot deduct sick time, or they cannot do anything to really jeopardize your sick time or your employment because you've called in sick because of COVID.
Yeah, and, all of these bills, because of COVID, were in reaction to what I think is everybody realizing that definition of what an essential worker is. All of a sudden, again, 2 years ago, no one would say the frontline essential worker in my neighborhood is the grocery store worker. But all of a sudden, we started really realizing, there are heroes all over the place we never gave credit to. The nurses, the doctors, the medical staff that, kind of just functioned in the background, and they get their occasional accolades or maybe a story in the paper if something fantastic happened, but navigating through a pandemic,
Oh, sure. You had the bus driver, the train operator.
Sure.
All these people were out there working through the virus and all, and it's a sad situation. Hopefully those who are covered but represented will have similar legislation done for them like we've done for, public employees.
Yeah, and that's, I guess that's my main point there is you're asking people to put themselves in harm's way. Everybody's getting the same warnings, and these public employees, they go out there and they put themselves at risk to keep the state moving, to keep the county moving, whatever. But at least there's efforts made, on your level and on the Senate side to recognize, some of the needs there as a, least we can do kind of thing.
Well, it's more than the least we can do. It should be the first thing we think of, which I do every day, is when I go to work, it really is making sure that one of the first thoughts on my mind is how good our workforce is and how we can protect them.
Yeah, that's, again, just something... it's easy for me to say, having been in your office, had these conversations, possibly used a little too much sugar in the coffee maker one time. But all of that being said, just knowing that focus is there, and it's something, again, on a personal level, I very much appreciate about having you in the position you're in, because we know you understand working people, and when you work for working people, yes, you're looking at working people, right? Not just those that are represented, and that's why as you mentioned before, you'll let people know they should organize, they should try and get themselves into a labor union. Some of the things that we're talking about, these things happen because of labor's involvement in educating elected, in writing rules to protect workers. But you've always had that universal view.
I credit my parents to that, and that and everything. You hear people sometimes complain about their union dues and all, but every penny of that, those dues go to protect their rights.
Right.
And that's important to them to know. And I know it feels hard when your check comes and you see so much deducted from it, but you don't realize how much has been added to your check because of those deductions. Right.
That really does make a difference in the long run. And, there's national data on this as to, what an unorganized workforce gets in gains versus an organized, a union or a non-union. And while the union member pays dues into the system, they see greater gains over their lifetime. It ends up being, a significant percentage more value in their pocket.
And it's fair. I mean, for those who live in whether it's Suffolk or any county, whatever those public employees are making in their jurisdiction benefits them because they have a dedicated workforce that makes their communities better. So I know some people begrudge unions for, well, they get this, they get that. One, they get less pay, but secondly, they are providing you that service day in and day out that you don't have to worry about.
Right. And another aspect that you touched on earlier, we're members of the community, and there is a focus, at retirement time, you want to stay in that community you were a part of, and that keeps, the revenue that your pension money that you're getting in retirement is just going right back into the economy, and it's growing the economy in the same way.
Sure, and as people retire, actually in this budget this year, we took care of things to make sure that the retirees are taking. There was some talk about doing away with the income-related, monthly adjustment amount, what they call IRMA.
Right.
but the legislature, restored $4 million, so that remains in place. The Medicare Part B, we restored $1.8 million, the reimbursement level at $148.50 per month. So we really try to take care of not only the active workforce, but our retirees who are so important to this state.
And that's very important. All the active employees that I speak to in our union, I talk about, retiree issues, and they say, well, that's a retiree issue. They don't work here anymore. And I said, but we're all going to be retirees. We have to protect now, what's happening in the future, so it's there for you.
It's amazing, and like we said earlier, that, a majority of people do stay in their community after retirement. But those who do leave, the few that do leave, right, are benefiting from our retirement system. The work that you and your colleagues have done over the years, their check is going to whether they're in Florida or Arizona.
Right.
And they're doing a lot better than they were if they worked in Florida or Arizona.
Absolutely.
That's why they can afford, and they say, oh, I can live down here much better than, up in New York. No, you can live much better down there because you're getting your check from New York.
And that's because you gave 30 years of service to New York and New Yorkers, yeah.
Right, so wherever they go around the world,
yeah,
their check follows them, so they're protected. So if they think they're living well, they should be grateful to the representation they had while they were working.
Yeah. So just to remind our listeners, we're speaking with Assemblyman Peter Abbate, who's the chair of Government Employees Committee. And, Peter, we have a few more minutes left, and I almost hate to open this door, but this year's budget, the amount of bills, Albany in general, this was really an interesting year in a year of interesting things. And what is your take on, how things progressed budget cycle-wise and again, all of the various bills that...
Sure. Well, the budget was important. The year is not over. We still have until the end of June to get more legislation passed and take care of people. But it was a difficult year. When we first got elected in November, and those of us who knew we were coming back in January, didn't know where the state was going to stand. We could have had a $15 billion deficit.
Yep.
We did not know which administration was in until a couple of days later. And then even though we had a new president there, we weren't sure if he can pass the bill we needed to get that money for New York so we can restore the services and pay. A lot of people deferred some of their benefits, whether it was 1 or 2%, whether they would do a raise,
right,
whether it was health care, and we weren't sure if we were going to do that. And fortunately and thankful to our federal government, our president and both the House of Representatives and the Senate in the long run, that we took the Senate, the Democratic Party, took the Senate. I hate being political in a sense, but
right.
That 51st vote was important to make New York whole again. And because of that, all our services, no cuts in the budget. Every county should be very happy with the money they're getting. I'm sure county execs will still complain that they don't have enough.
Of course.
Right, but every one of them had no cuts to their budget. Education, very important.
Yep.
Factor in New York State is getting more money.
Yeah.
Than ever before, and services throughout the state. People are getting money for those services. Nothing will be cut, whether it's health care. And a major factor, we did a lot of legislation on trying to close some loopholes or things for seniors in nursing homes and adult living centers
right,
to make sure we took care of that. So what did happen will never happen again. And the money we spent to prepare, God forbid, for a future pandemic or any emergency,
right,
some of that money was used for that. So, really, it's that federal money that helped us get over the hump on all of this. And so that money is being well spent. And I think people should be very thankful to our federal government. Well, not thankful in a sense, but it's deserved. The state spent a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
And the county spent a lot of money that would have been taken out of essential services for the following 2 years. And actually, people don't realize as much, but the federal legislation grants money for 2 years
right,
to maintain resources. And no matter what you might hear, none of that money is being used for things that weren't taken away because of COVID. Very few new programs were put in there, and we're hoping that the new programs that we do put in, really, because of COVID, there's a good side, unfortunately, a good side to it, that we can do some things that we wanted to do, but we didn't have the money to do, and now we do.
Oh, those are all excellent points, and people look to their government to come through in crises like this. And, Suffolk County, New York State, we're doing, I think, all of us the best we could, but it really did come down to that federal component. And, just, I guess my final point before we wrap is, Suffolk County is a donor county in the sense that we give more in taxes than we receive back. And New York State is a donor state in that we give to the federal government more than we get back, and quite a considerable amount. And some of those other states whose leaders are, impediments to getting things done for New York are the same states that benefit from New York State having the extra revenue to give to the federal government. So if New York State wasn't able to give that extra revenue, that wouldn't just impact what happens in New York State, but in all these other, receiver states.
No, you look at Wyoming, Montana, Idaho. All of them are receiving double the amount that we're giving.
Yes.
From the federal government. Nevada, all of them, they're getting money like at least double,
Yeah.
than what we give. So the money we're giving to the federal government is going there, with our taxes. And hopefully we can get another boost, especially for, our constituencies in Suffolk, Nassau, and New York, Westchester, where taxes are kind of high, that we can restore that limit on 10% deduction on state and local taxes, what they call SALT. That if we can get that done, I think that would be a great advantage to our middle-class people who, make up our communities. Yeah,
and that's the name of the game. Again, my guest this morning was Assemblyman Peter Abbate. And Assemblyman, again, thank you so much for what you do for the people in the state of New York, but especially on behalf of my members and in your role as the chair of the Government Employees Committee. Thank you, and thanks for carving out some time to talk to me this morning.
No, thank you very much for that compliment. But again, thank you, and congratulations again for the victory of your board, and just to let people know that you guys really work hard. It's not something that they see every day, but we've been on, I don't know how many phone calls or how many visits up to Albany that you've been on, and I've been fortunate enough to make a few trips out to your delegate meetings.
Sure.
Out in Suffolk County, and that's very important, the relationship and getting to meet the workers where they can discuss things. But again, thank you for what you do on behalf of the residents of Suffolk County.
I definitely appreciate it. And to our listeners, we will speak to you next week. We'll speak to you next week.